This is Friday. I just had a check with myself. Pat McGart's a totally unreliable source for these things, but I had a check for
Absolutely.
myself. Is this Friday? And it is actually this Friday. This
This
day
is
is
Freddie Jude, yes.
down. So that's good. That's one thing clear. Okay, how's the form, Pat?
That's great. Except that I don't know where in your part of the world, Jude, this last 2 weeks here, by God, if I ever hear anybody talking about a pipe hose ban, I'll going to bop them in the mouth, and I'm not even prone to violence. Jesus, Jude, we have had a serious amount of rain.
Oh, yeah, it's still the same here. It really was coming down. Once it starts in the morning, it seems to just forget that it's supposed
That's
to
it.
switch
So
off.
it's like literally, well, figuratively, I suppose. It looks like someone's turned on the tap and forgot to turn it back off again.
Exactly. Okay, let's go to events of the day. The story that's been dominating the headlines, certainly for the last 2 or 3 days, has been the death of Sinead O'Connor. I did a blog on that, and it excited some degree of response, much of it negative. I just say this, and then you can tell me what you think. There's no doubt about it. She was she was a singer on the world stage, not just in Ireland or in Britain or anything like that. Her version of "Nothing Compares to You" was nobody could come in a donkey's roar of matching that. It was superb from beginning to end. And I think her sudden death has taken a lot of people aback, including myself. That somebody who was once so beautiful and had such a talent was gone. I'll hear what you have to say, and then I'll come back to it again, to the subject of Sinead.
Dude, yeah, well, you've nearly said what I was going to say. Like, I have to own up. I am not the biggest fan of the world of Sinead O'Connor, so that puts me outside the pale right away. Like, what you said about "Nothing Compares to You" was absolutely superb, and you could feel the emotion, and she was a true artist. But her voice, while beautiful, just didn't do it for me. And everybody's entitled to their own opinion. Like, a lot of people like certain singers, and she just bypassed me. So let's get that clear. The one thing, Jude, I do think it's his last while is, the girl definitely needed help and probably didn't get it. But then the other side of the story, somebody said to me the other day, would she have accepted the help even had it been given to her?
Yeah.
She had a very troubled life. Her background was horrific. Apparently, she suffered. I haven't read this firsthand. I've just been told that she suffered horrific abuse at the hands of her mother, etc., 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 and so on. So all I can say is the poor girl was a troubled soul, and if somebody had been able to help her, great. But obviously, people couldn't. The death of her son Shane last year, what was he, 17?
Uh-huh.
He committed suicide. Dude, that's bound to have had a terrible effect on her, because it certainly would have had a terrible effect on me, so I can relate to that. Dude, that's about as far as I can put it. And dude, I suppose I should own up, because I'm not going to hide it. There was something about her that used to sort of disconcert me. That hair cut up, like Joan of Arc,
Shaving her head, yeah.
and all those tattoos. I always found that a wee bit sort of, I found a wee bit hard to deal with, because I said there's something seriously wrong here, and made me feel uncomfortable. And like, by the way, that's not lacking in sympathy for far from it. It just something about it. Just I thought, I felt uncomfortable watching her. I was never at ease.
That's the point I would come to. Everybody has responded either privately or publicly or both to her death, because it was very sudden and because she was such a talent.
Yeah.
And she was Irish, of course, too. But there's this sort of, the Latin tag, as a scholar of Latin, you'll know, but de mortuis nil nisi bonum decendum est.
Say nothing of the dead.
Yeah, exactly. Don't speak evil of the dead. And there's a lot to be said for that. But again, I sometimes think that we fall overboard. When somebody dies, they become a saint, whereas in their lives, they're like most of us, they're flawed individuals. And I thought there was a danger of that. In fact, I'm certain there's a danger of that, because as I say, I did a blog on her, and I said what I've said to you, first of all, that she was a marvelous, marvelous singer. She was, as well as that, she was extremely beautiful, even though she shaved her head, and they say a woman's hairs are crowning glory. She still managed just a perfect face. But my criticism was that she seemed to bounce from one project to another, and certainly from one religion to another. The famous tearing up of the Pope's picture. I think people, I put up on my blog site and linked it to Facebook, and people on Facebook were saying that, oh, you're saying you're not being nice about her, sufficiently nice, because she tore up the picture of the Pope. Not at all. I wasn't particularly fond of John Paul II. In fact, I think he was a sort of a right-wing Pope. Some things about him were good, I guess, but other things I wasn't at all that keen on. But that didn't. The truth of the matter is, I don't know. Do you know why she tore up the picture of the Pope? What was the reason for that?
Allegedly, she was aware of the abuse that was coming down the track that we didn't know about. Whether that's true or not, I don't know.
Was that not a long time after? Was that not a long time after that news broke?
I'm not, Jude, I'm not 100% sure, so there's no point. I'll be bullshitting to say I know. But Jude, the whole thing about, look, there's this sort of thing, like there's a lot of hypocrisy out there too. She was dropped by her label after she sold them, what, 6-7 million records, and so on. And I'm sure now the record label will put out a statement saying what a wonderful artist, and she was an icon and a legend and all that sort of stuff. And there's all sorts of people crawling out of the woodwork and so on. But Jude, here's the thing, and that's reality. We all might think somebody's a great, but do you want to be in the company of somebody that's, it's edgy and you don't know how they're going to react? Steve Davis came out a great one with Alex Higgins. He says, I can't deal with that guy. He says, very simply. He says, because one day he's friendly, nice, and the next day he's nasty and vindictive. And he says, I just can't deal with it. Dude, Sinead O'Connor was a bit marmite. Some people loved her and some people, but now everybody's coming out and saying and by the way, she had a terrible life and she struggled with mental health, and my sympathy in total goes with her, and I really genuinely mean that. But she did bring her own difficulties with her. And Oliver Reed was a difficult to deal with. Van Gogh was difficult to deal with. You can keep on naming. That doesn't mean to say you don't respect them. But hey, would you want to spend a couple of weeks in their company?
Yeah. Well, I think those are two important points to make. In terms of how you saw them as a person and whether or not they were talented. I think there's little doubt she was talented. Although I must say now, I loved, as I say, Nothing Compares to You. But she moved through the fair, which is a song I love. Yeah. She recorded Foggy Dew, which I also loved. And she did a good job on them, but I didn't think she did a terrific job as she did with Nothing Compares to You. Would you
Jude, I'm the same, Jude. There's no point in me saying that I absolutely adored Sinead O'Connor. I didn't. And if I'm coming on here now because she's dead and saying I did, like my wife says, you never particularly liked her as a singer. And I got to admit, Nothing Compares to You was absolutely superb. But some of those stuff, like when she sang some of the traditional, no, She Moves Through the Fair, I did like, but it's not my favorite version of She Moves Through the Fair.
Yes, that would be my view as well, because I really love both those songs. The other thing is, maybe it's just I'm stupid, or maybe I'm deliberately blotting it out, but I can't remember what things, apart from that thing about the Pope's picture and presumably the Catholic Church and abuse and so on, I can't remember any particular views she espoused. I thought at one stage she was speaking out for republicanism, but did I imagine that maybe, or?
I think you imagine that. No, I'm like, maybe I'm on a train track. Maybe I'm too old for all this crap. But one day she comes on and she's dressed as a Catholic priest. The next day she comes on and she's dressed, and this is in the Late Late Show, by the way. She's dressed as a nun, as far as I remember. The next day she comes on and she's dressed in a Muslim garb. And I'm sort of going like, hey, and by the way, I am not any sort of right-wing Catholic or anything, far from it, But, I sort of said, am I supposed to follow this and sort of say, this is wonderful, this is great, that this is, I just couldn't make up, I have a sort of an idea. Look, I have certain set of values of what I know, and I can't keep changing them every day of the week. And I don't, Jude. I basically have lived by the same set of values for the last 50 years.
Mm-hmm.
Sinead seemed to be able to change. I couldn't follow that. I genuinely couldn't. I used to say, wait a minute, this is a troubled soul, and why aren't people saying she's a troubled soul? Well, they were, of course, but you know. That doesn't mean you sort of say you have to accept everything about her. That was, and that made her a great person.
Yeah. Well, there were some people who saw that as being, evolving or thinking, the way we change
Nah,
as we grow older.
yeah,
But I didn't get that impression somehow. It seemed, as you suggested, a certain erotic quality, bouncing
yeah,
from one thing to another rather than evolving through it. But again, we
yeah.
don't know. We don't know the woman.
I don't know. I don't know. This is all subjective, personal opinion, Jude, and
Yeah, yeah.
I'm open to totally correction.
Yeah, yeah. So all I would say is, God be good to her. God be good to her. She had a hard
Yeah,
enough time in this life. But I would say people shouldn't jump down your throat because you don't subscribe to the notion of
Jude,
her being
in this
saintly.
country, you're supposed to follow the herd. You're not entitled to your own opinion, and that seems to be Jude. All I can say is I thought she was uh, a woman of genuine talent, and I think she was a very troubled woman. And God bless her. Really,
Yeah,
that's about as much as I can.
exactly. Were you aware that Randy Meisner also has died recently? Randy
The guy
Meisner of
from the
the
Eagles,
Eagles.
yeah, yeah, he was one of the original guys, 1971, I think.
Yeah.
He was the original member, wasn't he?
It was. It was. I haven't. The reason I know about the Eagles, I came to them very late, because I have them on my jogging playlists. I listen to them as I go along, and they're great for very, very, very slow jogging, which I do. But I know I can think of at least 3 songs by the Eagles that I really like. One is "Take It to the Limit," which he wrote.
He was the lead singer in that one, wasn't he?
And it's a really nice, well produced record. And you can sort of identify with something about it. There's another one they have called "Do Something." Just sit
No,
there
I
in
don't
the
know about that
rocking
one.
chair, do something. I identified with that immediately. And then, of course, I think the best song they ever recorded, I don't know who wrote it, was "Hotel California."
Are you?
You know that one?
Uh,
I thought that was
Absolutely.
I thought that was a work of art, actually, where they talk about stabbing the beast with the steely knives, and you could
I
check
got to say,
it
you can book out, but you can never leave.
in. That's right. Yeah. So, in a way, I was not in a way. Simply the truth. Randy Meisner and the Eagles are a group whose songs I know and still enjoy. Sinead O'Connor has a song which is superb and above all of those that the Eagles ever recorded. But other than that, there isn't any really song that I can remember for or would want to
No.
particularly play. Anyway, enough about that. That's sad. May they both rest in peace. Now, you did you send me a thing in Varadkar, or did I say? Oh no, I think I dug this up myself. Where he
No, you
said
sent it. You sent it to me.
something about working hand in hand was the term he used with the British government.
Uh,
What do you think's going on there, and what's he talking about?
I really do think it's getting worse rather than better as regards Stormont. I think I sent you a wee note. Read earlier this week. Our friend Nigel Dodds, Lord Dodds. Where is he? Lord Dodds of
I
where? I
like
don't even
you.
know.
You said our Lord Dodds, our Lord.
He wrote apparently an 1,800 word opinion piece about
Yeah.
the Windsor framework, and he says it really doesn't fit the bill at all, and so on. And you get the impression, Jude, that there's something going on within unionism, particularly in the DUP. You get the impression that Sir Geoffrey, wants to find a solution, wants to get back into Stormont, but some of the big beasts in the party, particularly Dodds and Gregory Campbell and various other people, are putting up roadblocks all over the place, preventing it. Now, well, that will lead to a split in the DUP or whatever. But, dude, I can't see, and I think Leo mentioned it. He says there's a big difference between hope and expectation. He hopes Stormont will be back in by September, but the expectation is that it probably won't. And if Lord Dodds is right, it certainly won't be coming back in September.
I was listening to Nolan this morning, and he said that they couldn't get any of the DUP, as usually is the case. They couldn't get anybody from the party to come online onto the program. but he said he'd talked to a number of senior figures, very senior figures in the DUP, and that they had expressed views that were even much more hardline than anything that Jeffrey was saying. Jeffrey is saying, if we get our 7 requests and somebody says those actually boil down to about 3 rather than 7, only when those are satisfied will they go back in. But from the way Nolan talked, having talked to these hardline or senior figures, it did sound as if it wasn't going to come back at all, maybe. Certainly not before a general election.
Here it is. I wrote it down. I didn't realize I wrote it. This is what Dodd said. It is clear that the Windsor framework utterly fails the 7 tests set by the DUP. It represents the embedding of the Irish Sea border to a greater extent than anything we have seen thus far. So, Jude, rather than easing up on it, they're going hard line on it. So, right, here's the other thing. Your original thing was about Leo Varadkar saying that the 2 governments should have a hand-in-hand strategy, right? Right. The Windsor framework was, what was it, Jude, passed by 529 votes to 19 or something or whatever at Westminster. They are not going to renegotiate it. There are elections coming up very soon, in the next year or so in both Britain and in the Republic. So that means the 2 governments are going to be well away from what's happening in the north. So I can't see a lot happening. Now, I don't know what was going on the last day when Heaton Harris came out and said he saw great progress being made, because everybody else was going, Jesus, what does he see that we don't?
Yeah.
So, Jude, I really don't know. But here, Jude, I have to keep making this point, and I keep making it, and I keep making it. The whole idea originally of the Republican strategy was to prove that Northern Ireland was a failed state, that there was a failed entity, that it couldn't work and wouldn't work, that it was an artificial creation. And the reason it couldn't work is because them ones are going that way and we're going the other way. And that was the whole idea of the strategy of the Republican movement. Who's leading the strategy now, more in that direction than anyone other than the DUP?
Yeah, I wonder, how do Sinn Féin, I had a chance to find that out, I suppose. I might not have got an answer, because I met John O'Dowd, not John O'Dowd, but John Finucane at this Irish summer school that I was going to, and he was passing by, and I spoke to him briefly. Do you think the Shinners want to get back in again? You see, on the one hand, you would say, yes, of course they do. A, because they want to look after their constituents, and B, because they want, the visible presence of Michelle O'Neill as the First Minister. On the other hand, you might say they don't want to go back in again because, for the very reason you've said, no matter what you do, the unionism will make things difficult and they make the things ungovernable if they're not in the top slot. So what, do you think Sinn Féin people are in favour of going back in?
I don't think they're breaking their heart at all. I genuinely don't. Look, I know quite from my other life, I know quite a few old Republicans, and most of them are old Republicans at this stage. And Jude, let me assure you, I asked a couple of years back, I asked one of them, well, not a couple of years back, but maybe 18 months, about Stormont coming back. He said, I couldn't give a shit if it never comes back. And that was as honest, straight, near enough verbatim what he said. So I don't think they're sitting saying, oh, this is awful.
Well, is it awful? I'm unclear, because I'm an unworldly person. I understand that there's money that could be invested in education and so on, and health, and it can't be spent because the Stormont hasn't assembled. Is that right?
Yep.
Yeah. Well,
there are monies available. The Welsh, no, it took some years, but they got a big increase in their Barnett formula for some reason. And apparently there are monies available from Westminster if the right approaches are made and a case is made for them. But right now, there's no one, neither the civil servants, nor the politicians, nor the whatever are available to do so. So right now, apparently our budget is the basic budget, and that's it. You're getting nothing more.
So I wonder, what I'm wondering is this: are the British using Get Back to Stormont as a sort of a condition before they release this money? And should they not be concerned for the people here and say, well, if even your representatives don't go back, here, we're going to give you this money we have set aside for you in the first place? I mean, that would solve that problem, wouldn't it?
No, Jude, what is it? Your man, the American president said, "Speak softly, but where wield the big stick." I think that's what Heaton Harris is doing. He's saying, "Well, wait a minute, you're not getting the money unless you go back." And Jude, no matter what anybody says, there must be a lot of pressure on. No, they're talking about no after school meals things disappearing, kids program disappearing, children with intellectual disabilities getting no places at school, workers and the NHS who didn't get a pay raise last year won't get a pay raise this year. That there's talk about what is it, 200 million or 300 million that's owed from the Northern Ireland economy that'll have to be paid back, and there's no money for all sorts of other things, And Jude, a lot of places like Derry, where they need a lot of public spending, a lot of these community groups, their funding's disappeared. And they're so that no, the old people who used to go to maybe the community centre and get a meal once a day or something like that,
Yeah.
it's all disappearing. It's having a real effect. I mean, maybe the loyalist areas are so well off they don't need this stuff.
I wonder do people direct their ire against the DUP, or do they look beyond that and say the British government could get this money to us whether the DUP is installment or not? Do you think is there
Well,
any?
I'll answer to you this, Richard. The DUP got a hell of a good vote at the last election, so they're going to turn around and say that proves that our people support our stance.
How strange! How utterly
Mm.
strange that you would support something that would keep you starved of funds. Keep
Yeah.
people starved of funds. I mean, desperately in some cases, life and death, where they can't get to see a consultant for a life-threatening
Mm.
illness. It's very hard to understand that, but maybe it comes back to
Just remember, let's say the sort of the foundation stone for all our troubles, our recent troubles, is Brexit. Everything flows from
Mm,
that. And let's get this clear: the DUP played a massive role in bringing that about.
yeah,
And as to use my mother's expression, hell rub it up for the difficulties now, because their arrogance, really, and their nastiness, and at the time of Brexit, even though 56% of the people here voted against Brexit, they went to London and sort of said, "We speak for all the people in Northern Ireland, and we want the hardest Brexit implemented that we can get," which was
of
against what the people here voted for.
course, of course. Although, yeah, well, maybe they'll come back. Maybe they'll come back.
Maybe.
If they don't come back, I think they're finished, frankly, because
Yeah.
if there's no Stormont, what's the role? One other thing, Pat, are they all being paid still?
Yeah, absolutely. Of course they are.
Okay, should the government not obviously stop paying them? Because I can think of one reason why they're right to pay them, oddly enough, even though they're not working. What do you think?
Jude, I don't know. I really don't. Probably, Jude, it might focus their minds if they weren't getting paid.
Uh,
But the
uh,
other side of the story, Jude, remember, wasn't it Jeffrey Donaldson said he could take 40,000 job losses of Brexit if the Brexit, no, they got the Brexit they wanted. By the way, Jude, Kate Hoey was on what do you call it, Twitter the other day, and she sort of said basically, you know, it didn't matter. The Windsor framework wasn't going to deliver, and somebody else. And so basically, she was saying that we're not going back in until we get what we want. And somebody said to her, "Have you not noticed the demographics? You're no longer calling the shots."
hmm.
This sense of entitlement that only their opinion counts and what everybody else wants is an irrelevance. Should that day, the reality must be starting to kick in somewhere.
Uh,
That
uh,
the days of unionism the sense of entitlement that unless we get what we want, you are not going to get what you want. That sort of thing.
yeah, yeah. And that just sort of keeps going on. The reason I thought why they might, the British government, that is, might want to keep paying them is a fear that politics would break down completely here,
I think
and that
that
you
is the
might have a
fear.
return of violence. Do you think would that be the
Yeah.
back of your minds?
Yeah, well, Jude, that's without question. That is, in fact, I should have asked you that because that's exactly what I was. That's the one reason to keep on paying. If we go back to people on the streets and no publicly representative, without question, that is the reason to keep paying them.
Hmm. Yeah, Joe Brawley said effectively, this is in an interview I did with him a couple of years ago. He effectively said that the reason we had peace was that both sides, Republicans and Unionists or loyalists, had their mouths stuffed with gold. They were all given jobs. And that was the reason that they had the ceasefires, and that was the reason that you had a Good Friday Agreement ultimately. Does that sound convincing to you?
Yeah, well, the loyalists, nearly every one of them got a job, and then there were these so-called community groups, and there were money was handed over hand over fist. These guys were running around in new cars and the best of new cars, and they were all in charge of these various projects and so on, while still apparently being well, whatever. Uh, well, the original question was about Leo saying hand in hand and so on. Jude,
Aye.
I don't know what's happening. Leo said he would like to see Starman back. And he says the British and Irish governments used to be in lockstep, and they would like to see a return to that. That they are not either on the side of unionism or the side of nationalism, but on the side of everyone.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Like, and he says, "Oh, there's a big economic conference coming up. I think, and maybe it's November, and there's a British Irish Council meeting coming up in
Yeah.
November." And he said he would like to see a deputy first minister and the first minister and the deputy first minister at this conference batting for Northern Ireland and for funds and for all that sort of stuff, Jude. So, but here's the question, Jude, and it's a simple one: if Darmon doesn't come back, what happens then?
Well, it's hard to know. I actually think that hastens the day for a border poll.
Same here.
Yeah. It's really odd that the DUP wouldn't have sort of worked that out. And so, let me take a quick sidestep here. One of the things Leo was talking about, or sending off vibes about, let's say, was this plan that the leader of the Green Party in the South has come up with for a rail network. I mean, a massive rail network that would take in
Yeah.
the North as well as the South, and would have links through Letterkenny, Derry, God knows where else.
Japan, Oma.
Yeah. Now, Varadkar, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Varadkar seemed to be dragging his heels a wee bit in this and was saying the need to finish these roads. I would have thought the roads, by and large, in the South were pretty damn good. And I would have thought that any future investment, given the state of the world in terms of the climate crisis, surely we should be looking for other ways than getting more cars on the road.
Yeah. By the way, on Tuesday morning, apparently, the real plan, apparently is going to cost 36 billion. Jesus, that's a hell of a lot of money,
Yeah.
right? And 9 billion of it was supposed to come from the north, and I can't see that happening either. But apparently, some guy on Tuesday morning was apparently quoted that Eamon Ryan's real plan. It's a great boost for why we should build roads. Because if you spent 36 billion on roads, you'd have a hell of a road network.
Yeah.
Anyway, bottom line of it all is Leo says for what no Jack Chambers, a Fianna Fáil guy, he says we need to finish the road network. The A5 between Letterkenny to Derry, on to Oma and on to Dublin.
Yeah.
That's going to cost someone. I don't know what it's going to cost. Is it $1 billion, but to get it finished? And he says for regional development and all that. But did you see that there's a real tension, conflict in government now? The Greens saying the only way we can meet our targets for carbon emissions and to get our the earth is burning, and the fossil fuels and all the rest of it, and more cars on the road, etc., is causing us. So if you get people onto a proper rail network and a provider an infrastructure, you will help yourself long term. That the world is burning, so let's stop the burning. But Fine Gael, they saying, apparently did something alone. Currently, only 6% of the people use public transport in the south, and they're saying this new plan would only increase to something like 10%. And they're saying for that sort of money, where's the development? But here's the other thing: if I could get a train from Letterkenny to Dublin, I'd be on that train. I hate that journey down to Dublin, traffic all the way. And final point, Jude, I was years ago. We were in Bern in Switzerland. And I remember walking around, and you could sit anywhere. There was no traffic, etc., etc., etc. And the reason our friend Jim Sharkey, he was there at the time, and Jim says there's an outer tram service comes every I think 10 minutes, and an outer trams, an outer ring trams are every 17 minutes. And Jude, you could hop on that every time, and you would be in the centre of town within 10 minutes and no traffic whatsoever because it was a public service and there was no fumes, there was no parking problems, there was no, gridlock, nothing. And I remember sitting thinking, why can't we have this?
Yeah, exactly. And especially given the fact that we had this whole rail network, or at least a large part of it in the old days, because I remember we used to sit watching as kids the trains going up and down from Derry. So we have experience of it, and with modern technology, I'm sure they could make it an awful lot better. There's just one, I approve entirely of that. I think the effort should be put into a rail network. I do think, on the other hand, if they've committed to the A5, maybe they should finish it. Maybe they should finish it. It really just does seem such a thing that's been hanging over all for so long. The last point in making this is, while I'm all in favor of getting cars off the road or getting people out of their cars and onto trains, there's a part of me that quite likes the flexibility of having a car. I want to go somewhere, I go outside the door, I get into the car, I put the boot down and off I go, right up to the door of wherever I want to go to, and then back again.
Yeah.
If I want to do that with rail, I've got to do a bit of walking and I've got to do a bit of waiting, and then it'll probably not take me straight to my destination. I might have to take a bus or something after that. So I have these mixed feelings. Maybe it's just that I don't have the kind of public services transport that you talked about, which is really efficient, really frequent, and where you just simply stop worrying about how to get from A to B.
Yeah, exactly. No, Jude, I think, what was he said? Leo said that the plan makes a great case for building roads. That was the exact quote. I couldn't remember what he said. Eamon Ryan's plan made a great case for building roads. But Jude, afterwards, a proper infrastructure.
Did he say that in terms of costing so much then, or?
Aye, that's what it was. It was a sarcastic comment. So there's a real friction now going on in the government. So and there's apparently a serious bit of infighting. But Jude, you're 100% right. Like we recently got the bus up from Letterkenny to Dublin. Just we didn't want to take the car, but then you have to find a bus or a taxi to take you to where you want to go. And I remember the day was raining, and I was actually going down to the Dáil, the houses of the Oireachtas, and it was raining, Jude, and I was carrying something. And you get soaked to the skin, and you sort of go, Jesus, if I had brought the car, I wouldn't have had this problem.
Well, would you not have had? Because if you're going to Oireachtas now, you have quite a job getting your car in there, because a lot of the roads are exclusively for the Luas.
Yeah.
And then, maybe they'd have parking inside the grounds of the Oireachtas, but I could see difficulties there too. I think maybe as far as the centre of Dublin is concerned, the day of the car is pretty well over, at least for.
But I love the line. I think it was, and maybe even the thing you sent me, the unnamed green guy who was quoted in the Irish Times. Do these effers, and you can, he didn't.
Well, it was
ever.
Yeah, it was F asterisk 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 ERS. I assumed that was fingers. Do these fingers? No.
Do these
You're telling me something
ever
else?
read the news? Do these fuckers ever read the news?
Yeah. Well, actually, they have a point. They have a point. Yeah. My God, I mean, you see some of the stuff that's on the TV these nights. That's unbelievable. And there's one record after another has been broken on a daily basis.
Yeah. This is the hottest year ever since records began. Isn't that something?
And I think we all have to sort of swallow the inconvenience and what we're used to. Otherwise, our grandchildren will literally not have a world to live in. And that's an awful thought. That's a terrible. I mean, I can't believe that governments are so stupid that they aren't putting in,
Wasn't it yesterday, Jude, the Guterres, the UN chief, said the world is no longer burning, it's boiling. That people, there are days now that workers can't go out because the human beings just can't take that heat. That there's going to be problems in regard to food, climate, everything right big time, and that these are really serious problems, and they're going to increase.
And major movements of people too, away from the parts which can't be lived in anymore. I wonder, why do governments not look at these pictures themselves and say, as the guy says, do these fuckers not read the news? Do they not watch the TV? Why are they so reluctant? Is it that they might inconvenience their constituents, and therefore they might get their seat the next time round?
Remember George W. Bush pulled, I was at Kyoto or someone, remember the original climate world summit where they agreed, he pulled America out. This is because it would affect America's economic development and the price to pay for it. But, everything's short-term gain, political, economic, social, everything on long-term loss. In other words, won the battle but lose the war. And and every politician seems to have that mentality.
Well, I personally, I mean, I mean this seriously. I personally would be prepared to put up with a considerable degree of hardship if I thought that would address the problems that we now face in terms of crisis in the.
I think a lot of people would.
Yeah. Would you?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But I've got grandkids. Now I would like to know what sort of world their grandkids will have.
Yeah, we're not doing a good job so far. I think some people are they're so silly. They're saying, it'll never happen. Never happen. It's probably exaggeration.
Never happen.
Yeah, never happen. Okay, Pat, last point, because there's only a couple of minutes left. This is something I was talking to you about before. Philosophical point, really. Do you look back to your life, your past life, fondly or with regret and say, oh God, why did I say that, or why did I do that? Or do you just simply say, well, I'm 11 now and all that's gone, so forget it?
No, Jude, I think there's isn't but a life. There's many things. I look back fondly on many things, but of course I've regrets. There's some people you sort of hurt along the way. Things you've said you wish you hadn't said. Things you've done that you wish you hadn't done. And I think we all sort of, you look back on life, Jude, and I don't know how do you explain it. There are things that are gone. Like I work in a dairy journal, and there's many a morning now I wake up and I realize last night I was back in the journal, and I'm 20 years out of the place, Jude, and people who are gone were in, very much alive, and so on. And the way you do things, and I wish I hadn't done that, and so on. Like I think we all live with that. Why are you asking the question?
Well, I find myself, the older I get, the more I think about the life that I lived, and did I do the right thing going into teaching? And well, I'll tell you what sparked it very quickly, because we've no time left practically. An ex-student of mine, young woman, well, she's be about 40 now, married, a child. I got word the other day that she had died. And that really stopped me in my tracks. This young person, I was an old person when I was teaching her, and she's now dead. So you realize how transient life is. God, what a gloomy thought to leave people with at the weekend.
Gloomy thought, anyway.
You should tell your joke now, or pull off that funny face you usually do.
I've had a joke to tell. I would tell it after that.
Well, there's what about Stormont as a joke?